We have new information about the condo building collapse in Surfside, Florida. This is near Miami, and thanks to a contractor who actually took photos of some of the significant structural damage just 36 hours before the unexpected collapse, we have some visuals to really see what the structural integrity of the building was. Now, I want to be clear that this isn't the end-all be-all. There still needs to be a thorough investigation into what happened here. But as of this video, 11 people have died. The number is expected to increase because 150 people are still missing. Now, a pool contractor who had been touring the building to place a bid on some of the repairs and cosmetic changes to the pool had taken some photos of what the area looked like because he noticed that there was significant structural issue, like there was structural damage he was concerned about. So as the Miami Herald reports, there was standing water all over the parking garage. The contractor, who asked not to be named, told the Miami Herald. He noted cracking concrete and severely corroded rebar under the pool. Now the rebar is obviously an important part of the structural integrity of the building, and if the rebar is severely corroded, that's clearly an issue. Now, the contractor noted that the amount of water he saw seemed unusual, so unusual that he made a note to one of the building staff members by the name of Jose. Jose told him that they pumped the pool equipment room so frequently that the building had to replace pump motors every 2 years, but he never mentioned anything about structural damage or cracks in the concrete above. And by the way, this wasn't the only documented problem by the contractor. The pool in the pool equipment room located on the south side of the underground garage, the contractor saw exposed and corroding rebar in the concrete slab overhead. So now we're hearing about so many different reports. You have this contractor who is there to fix the pool. He shares these images. Let's take a look. You can see some of the corrosion. You can see the cracks in the concrete. Let's look at the other photo. Gives you a sense of what the situation looks like. And again, the photos don't necessarily mean that the damage that we're seeing is in fact what caused the building to collapse. I want to be clear about that. But we had the inspection that took place in 2018 indicating that the structural integrity of the building was compromised. We now have these photos from the contractor, who was, by the way, there to do pool repairs and things like that. I mean, how many warnings do you need? And then we also know that Miami-Dade has this regulation where buildings need to be recertified every 40 years. Maybe you need to do the certification process every 10 years instead.
Yes, so when I first came to America in 1978, I was amazed by the lack of potholes and how everything seemed smooth, the bigger highways, et cetera, because I came from Turkey. And at that point, the roads were relatively smaller. We used to have big cities like Istanbul, but there'd be plenty of issues and the government wouldn't get to it for a long time, right? And yes, from time to time, things would crumble because they weren't built with any code or very weak codes, or they would cheat on the coding because corruption was rampant. And one of the great things that I loved about this country was things actually work, right? Those days are gone. So, you have a building that's in massive disrepair. They know it since 2018. Let's see if it falls, right? We now in Portland, because of the heat, the roads are cracking all over the Northwest. Giant pavements are cracking, the wires are melting. In Texas, the energy grid doesn't work in the winter or the summer. And nobody treats this as an emergency. At least in Turkey, all the way back in 1978, when big events like that happened, it would still be an emergency. Here in America, we're like, oh yeah, okay. I mean, it's not like they don't think it's an emergency that the building fell, right? But is it treated like an emergency? Oh my God, hey, let's make sure that all of the apartments nearby in Miami are inspected, and not inspected once every 40 years or et cetera, but especially if they were built a long time ago, we should have a process for making sure that things don't crumble.
Right.
We should have a process for making sure the energy grid in Texas works. Nope, because now corporations run everything. So it doesn't really matter. You're not going to get anywhere. In this case, it's a condo, so there's no one boogeyman there, right? And the individuals own their apartments, as we explained yesterday. But it's the general attitude of the government that things should not be regulated, because if you're gonna regulate things, 9 out of 10 times you're regulating a corporation, and 9 out of 10 times they're donating to you and don't want you regulating them.
Right, so typically what happens in these types of buildings where they're private units, right? They're owned by individuals. It's not like there's a landlord who's in charge of everything. The homeowners association is made up of individuals who live in the building, right? Who own the units. They're normal people like us. And they're not experts in the structural integrity of buildings. They're not gonna necessarily know whether or not the rebar is corroded or there are some issues that need to be looked at, which is why the regulation of recertifying buildings every 40 years is just not adequate. It isn't adequate, especially when you also put climate related issues into the equation, right? So now there's this big question about whether these coastal properties are at risk as a result of rising sea levels. That was something that David Dayen was tweeting about today. You should check out his work because he made a lot of good points in that thread. But nonetheless, is there a management company that was hired by the HOA, and did the management company miss something? Because right now I'm seeing multiple lawsuits being filed against the HOA, and I just know what HOAs are like. Like, they volunteered to be part of the HOA, it's awful, and they don't know what they're doing. It's a mess. Yes, there's mismanagement because they're normal people that are just volunteering their time to do this. And like I feel bad for them. This is a failure on a governmental level.
But guys, when the government or a contractor tells you, hey, you should fix the concrete and the steel bars that are holding up the apartment, fix it.
Immediately.
And not only that, when the government does regulation on the few places where they do, where it's still left, and it's gonna cost you a little bit of money, do it. They're not just trying to take your money for the sake of taking your money, they're trying to protect your life, right? And so-
It wasn't a little bit of money though. The repairs were so expensive that each unit they wanted to do what's called a special assessment. Special assessment is, we're gonna have to charge each unit a certain amount of money to do this giant repair, right? The special assessment would have been $25,000 per unit. And some people there are on a fixed income, they're retired, they didn't have the money. So there was a lot of pushback from individuals who own the units. So like that's why like when you read about the lawsuits and stuff, it's actually a lot more complicated than I think the reporting indicates.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I saw it. And 25,000 is a devastating amount. I totally get that. Obviously, having the building collapse is more devastating.
Yeah, of course. So
in this case, it's a very complicated issue because of the HOA situation. In most cases, it's not as complicated. So for example, same Miami, I just remembered, when I had my wedding in Miami, we were staying at a hotel, and for one of the guests, the roof of the bathroom collapsed in the hotel. Right? So
what?
I mean, look, Miami's collapsing all over the place. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing things based on code. There's a reason for the code. If you're in California, it's because of earthquakes. In Miami, there's nonstop corrosion because of the weather. So we have to be careful about regulations. They're not for no reason. They're supposed to be to save your life. And you see this, unfortunately, a situation where they could have, but they didn't. Although the ownership case in this situation is more complicated.
Listen, don't drink Dave Rubin's Kool-Aid, okay? Yelp reviews are not gonna get developers and contractors to do the right thing.
Oh yeah, the libertarians. Oh yeah, no, after the building collapses, people won't live in it anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yes, after we've lost 150 lives, you morons. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.